Hey guys, welcome to Through the Bible Verse by Verse, a plain and simple study through the entire Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. Now, we are starting in the book of Numbers. Want to do a little background. Maybe now and then I'll do this. This Through the Bible study is just that, as I said, it is a simple study through the Bible. One of the reasons why, and my passion for doing this is, just as I said, it is a simple study. We do not get into a lot of scholastic details. I'm thankful, and we're thankful, that a lot of the scholarly work has been done for us, and so we are able to just read the plain and simple study of Scripture. Now, with that said, understand that the reason why I don't do a lot of scholarly details or give a lot of scholarly details, because in some perspective they are subjective, and while helpful, and certainly they give us the translations for us to read, we should keep them separate from the scriptures themselves, okay? And that's what I mean. We are able, God has given us a message, a revelation that is plain and simple. Anyone can read it. Anyone who can read can read it. Anyone who hears it read can understand it. And that's what my attempt is to reduce the plain and simple reading of Scripture to its most simple level. Okay. Now, for that reason, that's why I don't do a lot of, as I said, give you a lot of scholarly work. I don't mention scholars. I don't mention people's names because, again, one scholar is different from another, and it's all subjective in some aspects. So, for example, when we talk about the book of Numbers, when the writers of the Old Testament wrote the Bible, very few of them gave their names. So, the names themselves, okay, kind of added over time. So the book of Numbers was not necessarily a part of the writings. Now, the first 5 books of the Bible are usually attributed to Moses. The first 5 books to Moses. However, there is other opinions that maybe the books of the Old Testament. So let me just put it this way. When we break down the Old Testament, okay, so of course the major sections of the Bible is Old Testament and New Testament. But in terms of the writings themselves, when we talk about the Old Testament, then there's basically 3 sections. Okay, so in the first section, which we're going through, you can almost say it's a historical account. The second section is what's called the books of literature, such as, Song of Solomon, Proverbs, Psalms, things like that. Then the third section is the writings of the prophets. And then that's broken up into 2 sections, what is called the major prophets and the minor prophets. Now, all of that is not what God wrote. In other words, he didn't break it up that way. In other words, these writings were collected and they were arranged. Now, just again, this is something farther down the our journey. When we get to the writings of the prophets, we're going to study Isaiah with most of the minor prophets. And the reason why is because all except for the last 3 writings were during the time of Isaiah. So we're getting that when we get to there. Again, it's kind of a long journey for us, but you will see why. Now, the reason why I say that is because the way that the books of the Bible are arranged is usually what is believed to be, okay, in the order of the writing. So when you take the sections, right? So you start with Genesis, not that in itself Genesis, the first 5 books is believed to be written in the same time frame, unless it was written by another author. So let me circle back for a moment, that the first 5 books that's usually ascribed to Moses, there's some that believe that Ezra, the scribe Ezra, who wrote the book of Ezra, after the Babylonian captivity, penned a lot of these historical books. Some even believe that while saying that Moses wrote the first 5 books, there were certain aspects that Ezra supplied. So for example, and we'll see some of this in the book of Numbers and then also Deuteronomy, like you see the phrase that, and their tomb is with us today, right? Meaning after the events that's been written, then they were saying that, well, this tomb may be here today. Well, what today is they referring to? Most notably, for when Moses goes up, as he's writing, right? Remember, he's writing a lot of the first 5 books, but then you get to the end of Deuteronomy, and then we'll see also the last day is written in Numbers, where it says that Moses then he makes his last address to Israel, which pretty much is the entire book of Deuteronomy. But after he makes that address, he leaves. He goes up into the mountains. He's never seen again. But yet we see this kind of scene where it says that he goes up and he's buried. Well, how do we know? And certainly, did Moses write that before he left, or did who knows, or whatever, right? We don't know. So it's believed that Ezra could have supplied these kind of information to us. All right. But each section, then, the books of the Bible are arranged in what is believed to be in order. So when you get to the first section that we're going through, it goes from Genesis to Esther. And it's believed that these were, you follow each writing that it is believed that this is when they was written. Then you have the second section when you start with Job. Well, Job is actually, in terms of the date, it's believed to be somewhere around the time of Abraham. And Job is believed to be the oldest writings in the Bible. So then again, same thing when we get to the writings of the prophet. Isaiah is, as far as the major prophets, is one of the first books because of the time frame. But also when you come to the minor prophets, they're written around the same time frame, except for the last 3 minor prophets writings. Okay, so Numbers, when we come to Numbers, the book of Numbers is the 4th book. We're in the 4th book now, having gone through Leviticus. As I said, it was the kind of operating manual of the for the priests, which made it very tedious and meticulous. Okay, so it's not the most inspirational book. It wasn't meant to be. It was meant to, okay, priests, this is what you are to do. This is how you are to perform the service of God. Okay, so now, but it is still in lockstep with the writing. So you have Genesis, then Exodus, the Exodus being the Exodus from Egypt. And so it tracks their journey. So Numbers, you can debate whether or not that is the best title for this. And remember, it's not inspired. In this sense, none of the titles themselves were inspired. You know, at best we have the author's name when we have them. So, but the book of Numbers, the reason why scholars attach this name to it. And again, I don't even know when these names were attached. These names have been centuries old, right? So it's not even modern scholars. But the term numbers is given because there are two major genealogies. Okay, now I'll get back to that in a moment. But the other thing about the book of Numbers is that its timeline. So you start off in the second year, meaning you go one full year, and now we're in the second year. So during this second year, there are kind of three sections where things have happened in the book of Numbers. So during this time, this is the first part is when Israel mess up. This first generation, they mess up. And they are the cause of the 40-year wandering. So the book of Numbers kind of spans from the second year to like the 40th year of the wanderings of Israel. So you have this jump from like the second year to the 38th year. And then it kind of goes all the way to the end, and then actually the kind of last day of Moses, in which, as I said, the entire book of Deuteronomy consists of Moses' last day, okay, on this earth before he goes up in the mountain and he dies. He's buried by an angel, Michael the archangel, okay. So the book of Numbers, and there are a lot of astounding things that happen in this book, as well as you're still getting some mixture of commandments given. So Numbers is a very interesting book. It is a very interesting book to go through as we go through it. All right, now as I said, let me go to this. As I said, we the first part, and there are a couple of sections where you have these detailed genealogies, okay? These detailed genealogies. And as usual, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to glaze over them because they, as you can see, they're quite, let me come on, go back. They're quite detailed, and the purpose of the genealogies, okay, the purpose of the genealogies was to have accurate bloodlines. So the main bloodline is Jesus, the Messiah. Second bloodline, priests, okay. Third reason for the bloodlines, ancestral and family genealogy, tribal genealogies. So like, for example, we're going to see this when later on in the book of Numbers, when the land is divided up. If in fact, this is so important that the book of Numbers is going to include okay, it's going to include an issue where a man dies because of sin, and then so his daughters come up and says, my father, he died because of his sin, but what about his bloodline? And so this whole issue of, well, okay, this man's bloodline should be carried on, okay. Then after that, people came back and said, hey, wait a minute now, these women who came along and said that you're giving them the bloodline, but what if they marry outside of the tribes, right? What if they marry outside of the tribes? So then they had to go and go, right, you got a good point. So these women, you can only have this bloodline as far as land, right, as long as you marry within the tribe, so that the land can stay within the tribe. So these issues they dealt with, they were very serious to them, okay. So this is what the purpose of the genealogies are. And then, as I said, when we went through Genesis chapter, I think it's chapter 5, that genealogy, sometimes There are little tidbits of knowledge and things that's thrown out, revelations that's thrown out. But the main thing is that people were able to track. So, for example, especially during this time, that if you said that I'm a descendant of David, you had to be able to prove that. If you said you were the high priest, you had to prove that genealogy, which is kind of interesting later on when we get to the Pharisees. I don't know if they were able to prove any of their genealogies. You had the Pharisees, but then you also had the priests. And so Annas and Caiaphas, the priest during the time of Jesus, we don't know if they ever established their bloodlines. I don't think the Bible just dealt with it, you know. But the Pharisees, who were the leaders, they were basically scribes, which kind of would have made them sort of, they were kind of a ruling group. So there could have been a mixture of priests, but also they could have been anybody, because Rome, in this sense, established them. Now, if they were considered Levites, they would have had to have been from the descendants of Levi, the son of Jacob. So again, this is why this is important, these genealogies, why they listed. Now, these genealogies really lead up to Christ. What is interesting after Christ, what about the genealogies then after Christ? So, for example, the Israelites today who live in the land of Israel, how do we know that they are the direct descendants of Abraham? Now, it's just a question. I'm not seeking an answer. I really don't care about the answer, because there are other spiritual things that come into play. In other words, the covenant with God. But right now, they're certainly called Jews and Israelites. By the way, there are black Israelites who are in Israel as well. And the black Hebrew Israelites and those groups like them that claim that the Jews are black. And I have many discussions with them. And I always ask the black Hebrewites or the black Jews, right? Because there are different classes of this, you know, black Hebrew Israelites and those that call themselves black Jews. But they always twist scripture. And I asked, well, have you provided a genealogy that ties you back to David and Abraham? They never give me an answer. But also the current occupants of Israel today who are called Jews, have they been able to supply a genealogy that leads back to Abraham? Just a question. This is why genealogies are important if you're claiming. Now, it's interesting, this genealogy is going to pop up during the tribulation period, because 144,000, God is going to pick 12,000 men from each 12 tribes. How will they do that? Some kind of way. This genealogy is going to pop up, because they're going to have to be able to say, we're of the tribe of Levi, we're of the tribe of Issachar, we're of the tribe of Judah, so forth and so on. Okay, but that's something we'll leave to God at that time. But at this point, this is why, especially before Christ, the genealogies is extremely important. That's why, again. So we're going to, I'll pick it up in the next chapter. And we're going to go through. And again, as I said, I'll probably just skim through some of the genealogies, right? Just skim through, because again, unless you know those names. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next study. All right.